Are we good? Okay, so a very warm welcome to everyone. Nice to see some of your faces more up close. Uh, I'm calling you from Canada this morning, so quite early, 5 a.m. here. And we're yeah, this is like basically our first public seminar because we had our launch event. Very excited to see how this goes, and now you also have your groups all set up, which is exciting to see how you're going to be bringing all of this together. I'm going to pass it over quickly to Chris with no words of wisdom at this hour. I need to get some more coffee in me. And let Chris take over and introduce our incredible speakers for the day. And yeah, really looking forward to it. And thanks to Nicole and Zahra for being with us today. Really appreciate it.
Hello, everyone. My name is Chris Dittel, and I'm speaking from Eindhoven, from Critical Inquiry Lab. And it's my pleasure to introduce our first seminar, which is around the topics of vibrational sensing and nomadic pedagogies as practice. We have this duo of topics for today. And just maybe a little bit about the structure of the day. So now we will have the first presentation by Nicole Ullier, whom I will introduce shortly, followed by a short Q&A, and then we have a short 15-minute break or so. And we will continue with Karachi Lajamia, who will be represented by one of the members of this duo, Zahra Malkani. Again, the presentation will be followed by a Q&A. And it is my pleasure, as always, to introduce you our first speaker today, who is Nicole Lullier, whose talk is titled A Membranal Practice. Nicole is a transdisciplinary artist and researcher from Santiago, Chile. Her practice centers on exploring sounds as vibrations, as construction materials to delve into questions of agency, identity, collectivity, and activation of a vibrational imagination. Her work materializes through installations, sonic and vibrational sculptures, custom-made listening and sounding apparatuses, performances, experimental compositions, membranal poems, and writings. She holds a PhD in media arts and science from MIT, and her work has been shown at several international exhibitions. Her talk will introduce a series of works and references that constitute the notion of la membrana, the membrane. La membrana is an organizational apparatus and model structure for tuning into our vibrational reality as a resonant territory for thinking and practicing. It is constituted of a stimulating and productive concept that fosters vibrational modes of thinking and being in the world. So through this presentation, she will delve into these ideas and how they have formed the foundation for her practice and research. So Nicole, the screen is yours, and we will return to you with some questions.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you for having me here. I'm gonna share my screen. Give me 1 second, please.
आशीष जी आप देख लीजिए एक बार निकोल और ज़ारा अगर वो co-host है तो वो शेयर कर पाएंगे.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Great. So, hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. I'm going to introduce my practice under the umbrella of this idea of the amembranal practice. So, I would like to begin by extending an invitation. The invitation I am extending here is one to engage in a membranal practice in order to receive vibrations that make things tremble and that shake limits that fragment bodies, knowledges, languages, temporalities, signals, and straight lines, among other things that can and must be fast. I invite you to activate imagination in a vibrational way in order to decenter, rearrange, and possibly unlearn some of the static and rigid things we have been taught. I could extend this invitation using many different methods, but in this case, I would like us to use my favorite one. I invite you to do it through resonance. Because when we resonate, we engage with a series of vibrations that activate membranes in our spaces, bodies, and minds. And part of these vibrations are perceived as sounds when we listen. So while we're resonating as well as listening, we become many. We receive, and by doing so, we also give back. Limits and borders are diffused, and things reorganize in an agglutinant relationality. So a membranal practice is a practice of learning from the possibilities of resonances and interferences so that we can rearticulate our relational ways and the narratives that define us. Today, these days, this rearticulation and reorientation seem to be more urgent than ever, as we have been living for way too long under a violent regime of extreme individuality promoted by hegemonic rigid lines in service of extraction and control. This is why the invitation I am extending today is one to explore other modalities through exercises of polyphonic togetherness, rituals for collective resonance and attunement, and spaces to listen to each other. To listen to each other so we can emerge together. This is why I invite you to behave and think like a membrane, so we can resonate like a drum. Let's activate our membranes and resonate together. In my work and research, I have engaged in different experiments that center in the exploration of sounds and vibrations as construction materials, materials that interweave agencies from the micro to the cosmic and that stimulate imaginaries, sensibilities, and collectivities. I believe profoundly that the understanding of a vibrational ontology can give us a series of strategies or methodologies to reinforce our resonances and alliances with ourselves and other entities. Something like understanding ourselves as part of a reality where everything is in constant oscillation, resonance, and relation. I usually work with new and ancient technologies and by operating from different disciplinary and identity borders. I tend to infiltrate in different spaces and use fissures I find as opportunities to question hegemonic perspectives and categories, and this way to explore other ways of imagining and being between worlds. This work has been for me some sort of vessel for resonant dialogues and collaborations where many things intertwine and are remixed on the go, such as disciplines, temporalities, perspectives, cosmologies, ritualities, states of consciousness, and imaginaries. For the past years, I have been directing my work around the concept of la membrana, the membrane, which I have developed as a conceptual apparatus and model structure that stimulate vibrational ways of being and thinking. Under this framework, to behave membranically means to be a body ready for oscillations. It means to think and experience in constant relationship with others. It means to be performative and in constant transduction. Everybody is a particle of a larger distributed membrane that is in an ongoing construction and rearticulation. Under this focus, the social fabric, or as I prefer to say, the social membrane, also includes bodies that are not only human, incorporating other types of materialities, subjectivities, and sensory registers to the conversation. So exploring the membrane can provide a territory that consolidates a more hybrid, convoluted, and confusing order based in a constant being in relation. It is an invitation to encounter the pulsating as an axis. So I am devoted to exploring La Membrana as a physical and theoretical place for ontoepistemological reconfigurings. Based on the configuration and characteristics of vibrational membranes, La Membrana becomes a sensuous shared space. It provides a shape-shifting territory that dynamically stimulates imagination and offers the possibility of thinking and being otherwise. La Membrana is an in-betweenness, a communicative boundary, and vibratory space that confuses distinctions between categories and also shapes rigid notions of reality. Also, some membranes embody a series of other complex transductive mechanisms that I think are worth paying attention to. So, for example, the eardrum or tympanic membrane, this thin semicircular, circular semi-transparent film that is, as it trembles with reality, has the potential of transforming sound waves into perceived sounds. Although we must remember that we don't only listen through our ears and that sound waves are not only perceived through audition, but for example, also through touch, and by attuning to practices of intimate and tactile listening, we can potentially unveil other scales of attention and reception, enacting some sort of continuous mediation of resonant material and immaterial relations. I propose La Membrana as a resonant apparatus to tune in, but not as a sensorial extension, most importantly, as a sensorium in itself. So by inhabiting reality from a membranal perspective, I propose thinking and behaving like a membrane, so we can be ready for vibrations, so we can be ready to oscillate, adjust, recognize, recalibrate, resonate, and tune into our vibrational reality. I propose La Membrana as a territory to enable a vibrational imagination, as a physical structure and conceptual apparatus to enable vibrational logics, to practice vibrational ways through membranal practice. Let's think about this idea of practice. So to put something into practice entails iteration, trials, errors, devotion, passion, patience, perseverance, mistakes, errors, repetition, iteration, flexibility, some sort of special bounciness, a little bit of a drummy characteristic. So in a way, it's never about finding answers, but constantly opening up questions. So I will present some exercises and experiments in my quest to tune into what I call membranal or vibrational ways of thinking. So we can put into practice our abilities to acquire and apply vibrational knowledges and membranal skills. I would like to introduce you here to these ideas, starting with this piece that is acid. This work is called Semilla, and it's a sonic capsule that is given as an offering to the earth, and it's meant to be a symbolic act of resonance and mutual care. So once this seed is planted through a collective ritual, when it's underground, from the underground, a subtle sound piece emerges. So, and in order to listen to the semilla sound, we must reorient ourselves towards the earth and put our bodies and ears in contact with her. This seed is, let's say, a symbolic piece that marks the beginning of something that grows in time, like an idea, like a movement. It is a resonant element that protects the place it is buried as it produces noise and unwanted vibrations that render this place invisible or unsoundable for extractive telluric sensors used by oil and gas companies to find new places for extraction. So this way, the semilla is a symbolic element of protection. And the sound piece composed for the semilla is done with sound seeds and samples in dialogue with a machine learning algorithm. And these sound seeds and samples are recorded and listened to in the places where the semilla will be buried. So in a way, it's constantly responding to itself, to the place and the resonant frequencies of our planet. So incorporating many scales of seeding. These little samples created are then available as seeds to create future composition for different semillas. So in here you can see this manual That is a manual for constructing homemade seeds, and it operates like a tool for dissemination and spreading this underground resistance of La Semilla. We can listen for a second of this composition and the sounds that emanate from some of these semillas. So in a way, our music is noise for the extraction. Then I would like to introduce you to this work that is called La Paracantora. In La Paracantora, it starts with the notion that there is no such thing as empty space, and that the absence of an image does not reflect nothingness, as Marisol de la Cadena and Mario Glaser write. This piece was done under the umbrella of a residency in CERN in Switzerland and Paranal and Alma astronomical observatories in the Atacama Desert in Chile. And let's say that La Paracantora is a traveling transductive tower with loudspeakers, and this artifact has different environmental sensors that are sonified in real time. So this is some sort of technological parasite that acts like a medium, like a bridge between worlds, offering a listening ritual of, let's say, the silenced voices that our human perception forgot to listen, that constitute these places. This device was for me a documentation tool, some sort of like note-taking device from another perspective, from another sensibility, to access these places where the earth becomes a sensor and nature and culture crash and collide. So unique disturbances emerge. In each of these places, La Paracantora offers a listening ritual, a sonic poem of the place, for that specific moment in space and time. This piece, called Cuchicheos, is a poem, a 30-channel sound system composed by silicon and latex membranes that are soft, rubbery speakers. There are very soft, almost imperceptible speakers that diffuse an audio piece in an intimate and tactile way. Let's say that this is some sort of fragmented choir of whispers that can be only accessed one voice at a time, but is still collective, as it invades the room with a soft cloud of cuchicheos, of whispers. This work starts with the poem La Contadora, The Teller of Tales, by Reina Poetisa Gabriela Mistral. And this poem was translated to English by Ursula Le Guin. So I see this translation as a membranal operation being enacted, offering a south-north dialogue and a link between the realms of science fiction and poetry. Mistral's poem signals to the importance of listening, attuning, better said, oneself to otherness and to the many stories that build our realities. So this poem centers on stories that are whispers from above, below, and all around us in unknown languages. I understand this poem as a door to other subjectivities and languages that have been long forgotten, but that still create the worlds we live in. In this piece, I propose a new translation of the poem through multiple personal membranal operations of translations and transductions. For example, one of these operations consisted on doing poetry readings to a machine learning system which responded to our words with drumming sounds. This was developed by my dear friend and collaborator Manaswi Mishra, and in that case, the poem guided a walk through the percussive pulsating latent space. There were many other translations and experiments, and the main objective of these experiments was to explore what else can be unveiled when language stops being semantic and bound to linear logic, to clarity. Also, with these exchanges, we question static notions of intelligence and intelligibility and open up spaces to resonate with ideas of intelligence and language outside of the human brain and as generative systems of relations. Continuing on poetry and speculation, this is a vessel to rearticulate reality and understand that when we project futures, we are changing the way we relate to our presents and pasts. The initiator of this sonic poem is called Nampul Wangulenfe Mapunauta, and it's a sonic poem that was done in collaboration with my dear friend and amazing feminist Mapuche poet, Daniela Catrileo. We did this sonic poem some years ago as we looked to hybridize contemporary Western technologies for space exploration. And hybridize it also with ancestral technologies for space exploration, in this case specifically from the Wallmapu territory in the very south of Abya Yala, where Daniela's peoples are from. And by confronting both the technological epistemologies, we created a visual universe using style gun models to accompany the sonic poem. This audiovisual poem aims to be a contractor of new mythologies that can help us navigate currently hybridized realities to heal and empower, as well as to travel dichotomies imposed by the West and its linear ways. This initial drive came from research we were doing at the time about colonialism and extraction in space exploration. Of course, this is very inspired by the Afrofuturist movements and the importance of telling stories that challenge hegemonic perspectives in our very multiple and nonlinear cosmic imaginaries. So for this, Daniela wrote a poem about cosmic travels from her cosmovision and perspective. And these cosmic travels have always been a thing since the beginning of times, and they don't require to burn any fossil fuels because we can actually simultaneously exist in multiple dimensions and spaces.
Ale, 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 ale. I love. A, F, Anh, Ed, Mari, resplandecemos como astros ahí. Navegamos hacia arriba, Wenumapu, en el río del Umpam, Wenumapu, en el Umpam, Huyen, Wanglen, resplandecemos como astros que escriben el Wenalfe, Huyen, Wanglen, Antu. Nampuri Wanglefe, Mapu, Nauta.
I wanted to share with you this. This is an excerpt of the full poem that is 18 minutes in total. Within other membranal experiments, I wanted to show you the installation called Membranas. This is a spatial and embodied essay on sonic emergence and practices of blurring. This installation is constituted by different types of membranes that resonate to each other in order to articulate a continuous call and response, an improvisation session between a responded improvisatory machine, human participants, and remote outdoor sounds and vibrations, for example, from wind activities and tremors from the ground. All these energies come together and set up a membranal system that weaves an inseparable sonic space of entangled resonant logics, agencies, and encounters. One of the membranes that shape this installation is La Orejona, which means the big-eared one, a technological listening apparatus, a vibrational membrane microphone that centers on the poetics of unintelligibility and fuzziness. It operates with the purpose of indiscriminately weaving individual signals into collective noise, into a collective, inseparable, muddy mass of sound. Let's say that La Orejona operates with it's not a precise measurement device, like on the contrary, it is an apparatus for confusing signals, for fuzzing, for agglutinating, for obscuring, for noising. And by doing so, she problematizes the notion of signal and categorization to explore the possibilities of noise and the loss of individual clarity as a place for collective vibrational emergence. So through La Orejona, I wonder, what hegemonic models of listening can be challenged, and what forms of relations emerge when thinking through vibrations? Following these questions, Resonaciones comes as a strong tectonic force. But also, and most importantly, Resonaciones starts from a void, from a very profound dislocation. So we were invited to engage with the collection of the Linden Museum, an ethnographic museum in Stuttgart in Germany, to engage with some mochica whistling bottles, botellas silbadoras. We were guided by my dear friend Karen Urcia, who is a mochica healer, curandera chamana, and cultural activist. Together with Karen and Francisca Gili, artist, dear friend artist and archaeomusicologist, we engage with questions related to the violence imposed by linear notions of time, the static idea of the archive, the overcategorization of realities, and the Western divide between subject and object. All through the resonances of these whistling bottles and the energies that emanate from them. So we follow Karen's protocols to listen and record their sounds. These whistling vessels are communicational technologies that are meant to open up portals among dimensions. But most importantly, they are relational subjects that have been forced to die when forced to be a static object of an archive to only belong to the past. So we created an installation where their sounds can be social again and can activate a collective space of resonant relations. To do so, we created an ever-evolving, let's say, shape-shifting composition using AI. And these are calls and responses based on the principle of reciprocal giving and receiving that is central to ambient thought. So their sounds were the initial call, to which we responded with our own sounds, done in collaboration with this machine learning system that reinterpreted our sounds and created new sounds formations that filled the room and activated further responses. We actually call these dynamic sonic layers responses, respuestas. In the ambient world, everything is in pairs, everything is in balance. This is rooted in a cosmology of reciprocity and dualities. Here, what matters is to understand dualities not as binary lesser categories that are composed by one or the other, but as multiplicity, where many are entangled. So it can be one and the other. So we engage with this work as an experiment in reciprocity, quantum dualities, tectonic relations, and spiraling temporalities. This is an experiment, I have to say, like most importantly, on resocialization. In a way, this resocialization, this space becomes and constitutes a resocializing machine. We have, as you can see in the slide, two main elements. One that is giving this sound system star irradiating a sonic space that contains and activates us, and the other that is receiving this ear-shaped mic stand. It's called Oreja Time Machine, Ear Time Machine, Cross-Temporal Karaoke, which is where the system becomes open, where people can actually offer their sounds to contribute to future responses and to contaminate the archive. So it becomes social. So it can be trained again. So the responses can evolve in time. Expanding in ideas of call and response, nonlinearity and reciprocity, these membranes that you see here are vibrational sensing skins. They are mediators that receive and produce vibrations. They are portals. They are an in-between. Like I am, like we all are. They are always on the way of belonging and not belonging. And as they mediate, they also participate. This work is called encuentros, which means encounters, which is what these membranes are constantly enacting and mediating and participating in. So these membranes receive different signals, such as touchy sounds, winds activities, the rain, caresses from the leaves and the trees, and even radio signals that are traveling in the air. It's really beautiful because actually what they receive changes depending on the composition and constitution of the air at different moments of the day and the year. So they receive and send vibrations. As they do so, they set us into connectivity, into a dialogical architecture of calls and responses. They mediate an ongoing improvisation session of oscillatory borders, confusion, reciprocity, and in-betweenness. Because that's what we are, a collective membrane of oscillatory borders and many, many complex in-betweennesses. And here we can listen a little bit. Okay, now we have it. So here you have a sense of how this encounter sounded and how these membranes became part of this environment. I just saw that the video, I didn't name it properly, it's called Encuentros, and was done this year, 2024. So all of these vibrational exercises bring us back where we started, La Membrana. And they are all excuses to shake, to mix, to destabilize, and to open up questions about what it could be to attune to a vibrational way of being and thinking. I think that by inhabiting reality from a membranal perspective, we can find other logics, other languages, other codes, pulsating languages and pulsating codes. And by putting into practice a vibrational imagination, I believe that we can release ourselves from the stiffness and the dangers of the ossification of thought. This, in the end, is an invitation to fuzz the rigid lines that delineate our realities and our imaginations. I invite you to think and behave like a membrane, so we can resonate like a drum. Muchas gracias por escuchar. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Nicole, for your presentation. 1 second, we just have a slight technical issue in the room, as always. We have something around 25 minutes to start Q&A or have a conversation. And to facilitate that, I would like to ask those who are online to raise your hands when you would like to ask a question or start a discussion. And those here in the room with me to do similarly in a physical way. In the meantime, I will start to try to resolve a little problem we had. Maybe we can use.
I hope it's not too complicated.
No. Do you mind if I jump in, Chris, and just say a few words while you're working on the technical thing?
I wonder, can you hear me actually?
Yeah, we can.
Now.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that was so amazing, Nicole. I'm so awake now, honestly.
I will then start with a question because unfortunately I do not see my screen. It just completely blanked out. And my question would be also in relation to this seminar. How do you think and how do you relate to air? And what role does air play in your work? Because of course it is something that is in some way a transmitter of vibration between bodies, living or the non-living bodies. But I was wondering if you consider air in some particular role in your work.
Definitely, and thank you for that question. And I would like to start by saying that isn't it our membrane in the first place? So it's something that constitutes and binds us through our breath. We breathe each other in a way. Similar as I mentioned, the resonances of listening, as when we listen, we also give back. As when we exist in here, in this medium, in this earth, we exist in this condition, in this atmospheric condition through which as soon as we exist, we also give back. As soon as we breathe each other. And so I think we have to understand that as a membrane that we inhabit and that we're part of as well. Now, in more particular ways, in some of the works that I've done, air plays a fundamental role as, in a way, let's say that every sound is shaking up the air around us. Every word is moving and removing energies, being part and assembling to certain bodies of wind. So I would like to invite you to think about that, about sound like that, as something that is like actually activating, shaking, and constructing different architectures in this moving air. So if we, for example, you see this piece here, like this thing, this is a little prototype, it's a kite. And it's a sonic kite that has two tiny buzzers, piezoelectric sensors that are used to output sounds as speakers, as very soft speakers. And this constitutes a research that has to do, that is called, more than called volantín, which is the word for kite that we use in Chile. But it's thinking about volantín as a soft air agitation apparatus. So what happens when we output sounds into the air and they become part of collective bodies of wind? So we have the capacity to actually become entangled with air as a force, as a medium, as a force, as a membrane that we co-constitute, let's say. And another thing that is not related directly to air, but is like touching more into winds and different bodies of winds. You know, La Orejona, this vibrational membrane microphone that I showed, the pink one, was initially, how it came to be was actually, La Orejona, the first question was how to create a microphone for wind, which is like contradicting all the conventions of like what a microphone membrane, how it works, and how it's a contemporary microphone membrane. It's filtering the wind out, so wind is noise. So we never can listen to wind. So La Orejona actually came to be with this kind of like a paradoxical question of how to make a microphone to actually engage with these entities. And then by engaging with this entity, I realized that we cannot fragment it, that this sort of categorical classification apparatus of control that microphones have become, this sort of like surveillance devices, when we open up the question to these other sort of entities and forces, it's rendered obsolete. So we open up the question for also many more entities and forces. So when we incorporate bodies of winds, forces of winds, which is like presences and entities that are constituted by air, we then encounter a device that is like for everything, for every vibration and every tremor that can activate this membrane. So these are like tiny ways which I relate to air through this membranal practice.
Thank you, Nicole. I'm wondering if there is another question from the online audience, those who are online or here in the room, or any comments or something you would like to share, maybe with Nicole.
I can jump in for a minute if everyone's like kind of collecting their thoughts, because I just thought it was so extremely rich. And I'm also mindful, like all of these wonderful students with us today are just forming groups and are going to be engaging in some form of unknown as of yet collective practice together, bringing these regions into dialogue, students based in Eindhoven, students based in Sonipad. And I just even wanted to get back to very practice-based questions, right? Because there's so many rich like conceptual and theoretical doors that open through your work. But even just on the everyday level, right? I really appreciate the sort of straightforwardness of a lot of these things that you said, right? And one was about when you're talking about practice, right? Like iteration, error, failure, so to speak, right? And like, I wonder if you can just talk us through a little bit about that, because a lot of your practice, it seems like you probably had to teach yourself a lot of, how do I build these sensors to do the thing that I want? These very sort of almost like behind the scenes of your work. And the role of the importance of this role of failure, especially when you're doing this exploratory practice, which is less about, you're not representing error, you're developing tools and techniques and mediums that allow us to sense our environment and each other differently. And I think that's a really important thing to sort of highlight here is is like, what is that sort of relationship? So maybe you could say a few words on this. It would be really cool to hear.
I actually really love your question and point, Patricia, because that's totally accurate. So all of these things, and I talk about my practice, this membranal practice and vibrational practice as something that is as such, is a completely unstable and oscillatory practice that comes from not knowing, that comes from honestly from my own biases and limitations. I have not been trained as an engineer, for example. Like in a previous lifetime, I studied architecture. I used to play drums when I was a kid, and later also as a teenager. Like in my 20s, I was a drummer in bands. So I also like self-taught myself how to do this, right? And then when I went to architecture school, I was thinking about spaces as drums, as resonant entities, and not as shells only, right? As containers and dormant, dormant boxes, but actually entities that are resonating with all the phenomena, situations, and relationships that they are part of. And within these questions, I started to think of how to unveil, and I think one keyword that you said in your comment, Patricia, is about that this is not a representation. It's really an immersion. It's really in a way that is about an embodied, like a completely embodied experiential practice. And this matters a lot because in the world of non-representing, then exploration and experimentation are key. In the world of trying things out and inventing or creating these sort of like systems and ways that are mediating ways of thinking and being, there's so many mistakes. And there we go again to the importance of not, like through my practice, I'm not looking for answers, but I'm opening up questions that open up further questions, errors that become something beautiful and have a potential, a generic potential. I care for that. And I think it has a lot to do with this notion of instability and paying attention to relational things, to improvisation, and again, practice. As a musician, the space of practice is essential, is how we start to tune into each other, is how we learn to listen to each other, again, so we can emerge together.
Thank you, Nicole. I have one more methodological question, but I will keep that for later because I see there is a question from Avril online. Avril, please go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, Nicole. I really like the idea of using the membrane as a metaphor also. One thing that came to my mind when you were speaking about the idea of resonant frequencies and the idea of the vibrations. I remember reading this story when I was in the 9th grade called The Sound Machine. It's by Roald Dahl. And it basically is this long story about how the protagonist creates a device that he uses to hear plants when they are hurt. And it kind of leads to him being really sad by hearing these frequencies that are kind of that the human ear can't perceive. And so I really think it also connects to the idea of the membranal concepts that you were talking about in terms of boundaries and thresholds. But at the same time, also his sound machine could also be like, I was thinking, probably a threshold between reality versus perception. And so I kind of linked both of them and I found it interesting as a concept.
Thank you, Avril. I haven't read this story. It sounds wonderful. I'm gonna look for it and read it to my child. And I think you touch into like such a key point. The idea of like perception or like these apparatuses, either our own or artificial apparatuses that we use to unveil reality, because that's what we have, right? So I think it's important to understand that the apparatus is entangled with the reality and is affecting it in different ways. So this is why, like, I also like through this idea of the membrane that is not a metaphor but can be. Why not? It's really like a sensorium and a territory to inhabit reality. I also like to play with this notion of like unstable apparatuses. This, like, I also call it technological apparatuses, as I mentioned with La Orejona, because are apparatuses that are like, how to say, they are not responding to the mechanisms of efficiency, of clarity, of detailed data, but all the contrary. These are apparatuses that are extremely confusing, unstable, so they have their own logic, which I like to think about as a vibrational membranal logic. So because these are the realities that I want to engage with and that I want to incorporate in my relational system.
Thank you.
There's Arjun before me.
Thank you, Nico. And there is the next question from Arjun Verma. Please, Arjun, go ahead.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes. Hi, Arjun.
Hi. I wanted to. It's not a question so much. It's most of your work actually reminded me of initially when Earth was still being formed in terms of cells and how like we've all read the story, how how water life was founded in water, and from there we evolved, and let's say the cell membrane came into existence. So are you using membrane to refer back to those, whatever, not archaic times but very early earth days? And what is the role of technology and all of this? That seemed a bit hazy to me, at least.
I couldn't hear very well the last part of your just
Um,
like the last sentence.
What is the role of technology in relation to membrane? Because that seemed a bit hazy. Yeah.
So to that question directly, but then I'll go more to the more primordial parts of your comment. But to what is the role of technology? I think it's an essential role. But then, and I talk about La Membrana, like this conceptual apparatus and model structure that I've been developing and engaging with. But yeah, like every sound artist and every human deals with membranes, right? Like it's not a thing that I own. It's not a thing that I invented. It's just something that I'm like, it's a territory that I want to inhabit. But the role of technology is central. As you can see, it's also part of my language. But I also would like to open up the question or open up like I don't know if provocation, but like the idea of like, so what is technology? What are the limits of technology? What are the categories of technology? Because technology, and this connects a little bit to the more primordial aspects of your comment, is, encoded knowledge in our cells is a technology. Organic technologies, vibrational technologies. There's so many ways of technology. So we can create certain sort of membranes that can be like artificial electronic apparatuses. We are and are constituted by other sort of technological membranes that we have within ourselves. I think the membrane as a social technology is also another layer. You know, there's so many different layers. It's like a multiscalar thing in a way. And then also encoding to this like pulsating knowledge within ourselves, as you mentioned, in our past as water. And in our past, I connect a lot to this notion through other pieces and explorations to the idea of the primordial sound and what happened when the first sound emerged, existed, was activated. And this was in a moment of the universe, the early universe that is called, the plasmatic universe. And this plasmatic universe, like there was nothing else, imagine this, nothing else, only a enormous infinite plasma. And this plasma starts to ripple and starts to collide itself. So the collisions of the plasma with itself created the primordial sound waves, the first sounds. And what's super interesting here is that these sounds, they appear in a way within the plasma as a medium and also as a source. So it's indivisible, you see? And this is like maybe the origin or like a very primordial way of understanding the membrane. It's not separable. And maybe again, we go back to the question about air and sound. It's not separable. Like, it becomes things that are infinitely entangled and that we can categorize to make sense as humans do. But this is not the real reality.
Oh, so you're saying don't treat them as, I don't know, separate entities, the fact that they are basically all linked. So the primordial soup, like we know today, um, and the sound today, or let's say the primordial noises and the sound that we know as sound today, aren't very different from each other, right? Is that what you're trying to get at?
Exactly. And if you think about this in a more extremely daily life kind of way, like when you're speaking, even now with your comments and questions, like the things you're saying, are these sounds separate from you? Is a sound not also part of you, of the air you breathe? Like it's a really like a way for me sound, and like I think that my love and obsession for sound comes because sound is a force that entangles. It's a force of inseparabilities that confuses categorizations, and this is why I think it's so generative in the times we're living.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm just curious again. What is the role of AI in all of this? Because I mean, I think we all use AI on a day-to-day basis for whatever part of our work. I'm interested to see how did AI fit into, let's say, the kite prototype behind you, for example.
So I work a lot with through different processes and collaborations and pieces. I have worked a lot with other sort of cosmologies and systems of knowledge, and through these epistemologies, the notion of the division between subject and object are not as clear as in the Western world. And by questioning what constitutes a subject, what constitutes an object, and trying to expand these notions by attuning to other knowledges, I have encountered a lot of these questions of like the computer and artificial systems as also subjects that are part of the conversation, and not only dull machines and that we can objectivize in many ways, but actually as participants that have agency. So for me, my more early experiments with AI have to do with these questions, have to do with understanding these systems as also subjects that are participants in these many call and responses that I work with. Most of the moments that I've been working with AI is to also question the staticity of certain things, of the archives, for example, as we saw in one of the pieces in this presentation, and how things can become even more unstable when they are imagined by other sort of systems, or imagined or produced by other systems that have their own sort of intelligence and logics outside of the human brain. So I am looking to also incorporate, and AI is a big one, but it's not the only one. So as I do with, as I incorporate AI with this idea, it's also the whistling bottles with this idea, certain instrument, drums themselves, the winds, vibrations, tectonic vibrations. So it's like, what are the limits of intelligence, and what are the limits of this sort of logics? And in a membranal territory, these limits are, I'm trying to expand them, I'm trying to confuse them.
Thank you.
Last question.
Okay,
Sorry
we have more questions. 1 second. We have one more question here in the room and one on the chat, just to for some timekeeping. Arjun, please go ahead. Read your
okay. So that's more of a comment. So are you saying that AI is more than what most people see it as? I'll give you the context why I said this, because in my case I like machines, vehicles, for example. And I, as an individual, see them as more than just non-living objects. So I was wondering if it's like, do you have a similar outlook to AI, or similar, how would you put it? Similar, I don't know, not feeling, but similar opinion of AI, similar relationship to AI? Like, do you see it more than just a mere tool, as what we most of us see it as? Let's be honest.
I'm not here to create any judgment on how
this
type of systems are seen. I just explore these possibilities, and like us, not only AI, as I mentioned before, but like other sort of entities that are entangled with the practice that I make. So for example, these vibrational membrane microphones, I don't see them as mere tools. I don't see them as objects that I use for my practice. I see them as part of a dialogue, as entities that have agency and participate in this collaboration.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I should stop now.
Thank you. So we have one question here in the room from Bianca, and then I will give the word to Nora afterwards.
Can I open the mic? Hi, everyone. I'm Bianca. Hi, Nicole. Nice to meet you. Actually, my question was also already answered to that in some way, but I have this observation and thing that I wanted to share with you and understand a little bit better, which are in your research, how do you look for the activators and the interaction? You're more interested in the interaction between the membrane and the nature, membrane and humans. Now you're talking about AI, so yeah, also this thing, how do you perceive them as a whole, as multiple entities that are able to interact between themselves? And in your research, there's things that are more activated by surroundings, and some things that are more activated by humans, and yes, some voice, for example. So I wanted to know where your research is more into it. I don't know if it's clear, the question, or the. Okay, thank you.
Yes, Bianca, thank you. Yeah, I wouldn't say that I'm following one specific direction. I think, as you saw in the presentation, there's many. Some of them are even about, some of these projects and questions, they even are meant to entangle with poetry and language as text, right? So there's many layers, but for these systems that have to do more with call and response systems, with respondent improvisatory machines, for example, or these membranes, like in Encuentros, the last piece that I showed, that are these membranes that are receiving all these vibrations and mediating an improvisation session. Of course, they could be seen as instruments for humans. Like if we go and sing to them and touch them and activate them and play them and percuse them as a drum, they will receive that and respond. But this is not the main objective for me in the dialogue with these pieces. This is not the main and only input also. These pieces are there to receive manys, and manys, which means like different sort of signals, different sorts of inputs, and that don't respond to a sense of temporality. For example, one thing that we have to see is also the framework or how my work circulates, that it is in exhibitions, that is in certain experimental performative gestures. So many of these performative gestures, they have to do in a human time setting, in a setting where there will be human participators, some active, other more like as part of an audience, or the audience as a participant as well. But you know, this is the framework, so I'm not just like completely going away from this. This is how my work is circulating in this moment. But the work itself remains there, for example, in the last piece, Encuentros. And the work itself is, let's say, working, it's existing in reality, even when no human is there, even outside of the timelines or the time frames of the museum or the exhibition, let's say. So I am interested in what happens also when nothing happens, and the idea that nothing is never happening. Nothing is never not happening, let's say. So it's a little bit going back to this piece, La Paracantora, that starts with the notion of there's no such thing as empty space, and that the absence of our image does not reflect nothingness. That this quote that I'm using from Marisol de la Cadena and Mario Blaser. It's exactly about that. It's art pieces that are activated through resonant performative gestures, but also emanate life, emanate agency and action, even when we're not part of it.
Thank you. And for the last question, I would like to ask Nora to unmute herself. Nora, are you still there? Wanted to ask a question, but
I'm still here. Am I audible?
yes,
Yes,
we can hear you.
I think you answered most of this in your little discussion with Arjun, but I still wanted to know whether your practice of music or drums inspired you in coming up with the concept of the membrana. And part two, what kind of softwares or AI rather did you use to come up with the different visual depictions that you showed us?
thank you, Nora. So I think yes. I don't. So it wasn't linear like that. The relationship between drums and membrana, la membrana, but I think it's inevitable. And I've been relating to resonant membranes since I'm 9 years old, right? By drumming. So it wasn't like a logic step. It's like, oh, since I love drums, what should it be the next? You know, it wasn't like that. As I mentioned before, like about like with my architectural moments, I think it was much more like that. But I think it's things that I wouldn't have been curious about if I wouldn't have this proximity to these vibrational membranes most of my life. So I think there are things that are, again, like becoming coded in ourselves, become sort of like pulsating codes that were there, that now, you know, I make sense of it by looking back and being like, oh, membranes all my life. And also before that, right? So I anchor myself there. I think there's a story there. There's some sort of my own fiction is based upon there in a very beautiful, resonant way, but it wasn't so linear. I think in the end nothing is. And then you mentioned your question to specifically the software and tools used. So in the experiments with machine learning algorithms, I've been collaborating with a dear friend, artist and engineer, researcher Manaswi Mishra. I'm gonna write his name in the. And he's an amazing artist and musician, and such a generous, creative soul. So we have engaged in many dialogues for the sonic experiments, where he creates his own systems. Then I think you were referring mostly to the case of the audiovisual poem Nampungwan Gulemfe Mapunauta. And for that, we actually created our model inside of a system that using different gun style tools, also with a friend that made them. But there's what was the name? I wanted to recommend you one if you were interested in exploring. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. There are many, but I remember that one time I experimented with one that was very simple, accessible, and didn't require you to know to have any knowledges in coding, and what was the name? So I'm just like, I want to say it in case you want to experiment and explore. It's called Runway. So you can check that. There's many others. I don't want to sound like a commercial for for this tool, but it's a tool out there if you want to explore it.
Sorry, could you type it in the chat box? I didn't get the name of the software.
Yes.
So just a small comment. The reason I asked is because I looked at your practice and I was really inspired by it, because I myself am a musician. I like to sing. I'm interested in music since I was very young, and also I'm an artist aspiring to be one. So I've been trying to combine the two, also at the behest of my professors, and I thought it was a really good idea to, whether consciously or subconsciously, come up with this concept of membranes, because it is touching upon such a wide array of aspects. Like you spoke about outer space and the primordial sound and the vibration of the membrane itself, and somewhere it connects back to the drum. So I've been trying to look at some kind of a common point like that to converge my practice in music and art. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Follow, listen to your story, Nora. You'll find it.
Thank you. Thank you, Nicole, for sharing your practice, your methods, and the way you think about the world and with the world. It was very generous. And I know you will be staying with us also for the coming hour. There will be also a Q&A, so we might have another minute or so to reconnect again. For now, we have a little break, I think around 15 minutes. So let's meet, well, now maybe at 30, 35. Is that realistic? Which would be 12:35 in Eindhoven, and can I will not attempt to calculate that in India. I think it's something like 4 or so in the afternoon.
No, there's
Yes.
a 3.5 hour gap. So it's what, 4 to 4, so 4:15, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
So we reconnect again in 15 minutes.
Thank you
Thank
so
you very
much,
much.
Nicole. I have so many notes. Thank you.
Let's share later. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Bye.
Thank you.
How are you doing? What happened? are back. We are ready. Maybe slowly we can gather again. So I just wonder if everybody's back. Maybe you could just turn on your cameras for a second so I see you are back with us. Before I introduce our next speaker. All right, I think we can start. And it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker today, who will be talking about eco-pedagogies. We have here with us Zahra Malkani, who is one of the members and founders of Karachi La Jamia, who is an anti-institution based in Karachi. It was founded by Zahra Malkani and Shahana Rajani in 2015. They seek to politicize art education and collectively explore new radical pedagogies and art practices. Karachi La Jamia is a nomadic space moving outside of the institution to occupy public spaces in the city, a site of study, disrupting imperial modes of knowledge production and circulation. In her talk, Zahra will introduce Karachi La Jamia's experiences and experiments with eco-pedagogy. Since 2015, they have facilitated a series of site-specific courses and collaborative research projects to explore the intersections of militarism, climate crisis, indigenous dispossession, and knowledge production in Karachi. Their courses are developed in close collaboration with local organizations and activists to build solidarity with ongoing struggles around land, water, and development in the city. We're very happy to have you here with us, Zahra. And again, after your talk, we will have some time for questions and a conversation.
Thank you, Chris, for the introduction, and thank you for the invitation. I'm very aware of time, so I'll try to be quick because I'm very interested in the discussion side of things. And yeah, thank you, Nicole. That was really incredible and a tough act to follow. But I'll just start by sharing a presentation here. I hope it's visible. Yeah, great. Okay, so my name is Zahra Malkani, and I am an artist based between Karachi, Pakistan, and The Hague, Netherlands. This is a very recent development. And in my own practice, my own practice is research-based and very much located in the aquatic landscapes of southern Pakistan, so along the Indian Ocean region and the Indus River region. And more recently, I've been interested specifically in sound. And these regions in which my research is located, and Karachi La Jamia's work is also located, are very much spaces that are at the front lines of climate change, but also very much subject to a great deal of militarism and infrastructural violence from the Pakistani state and international collaborators. And so in my own practice, I've been looking increasingly at sound and looking at oral and sonic traditions that act in the wake of this violence as vehicles for ecological memory, ecological knowledge, but also in this moment are mobilized in environmental defense and environmental resistance movements. But today I'll talk more about my collaborative practice, Karachi La Jamia, which is a collaboration with my partner, Shahana Rajani, who unfortunately couldn't be here. And Karachi La Jamia, we've been working on this project since 2015, so it's been about 10 years now. And we thought of it as a pedagogical experiment. I think it's become something more expansive project than that now. And as mentioned in the introduction, over the years, we've been organizing courses in collaboration with ongoing movements in the city. And we've also been undertaking research looking at the militarization and surveillance and weaponization of the university infrastructure in Pakistan by the state. So that's a kind of overall very basic summary of what we're doing at Karachi La Jamia. La Jamia can roughly translate to anti-university. But I'll start by giving a little bit of backdrop into mine and Shahana's collaboration, because I think this could give a better sense of Karachi and the context that we are working in and responding to in our practice. And so Shahana and I really started collaborating in 2013. And this was one of the first projects that we collaborated on that kind of preceded Karachi La Jamia. And in 2013, we were really in this moment in Karachi, in a really interesting and compelling moment in Karachi, where in 2013, Karachi was kind of increasingly gaining visibility in national and international media as a central node in the global war on terror, and was increasingly being cast in local and international media as the most dangerous city in the world, or one of the most dangerous cities in the world. And Shahana and I were really interested in 2013, kind of being in Karachi, looking at the ways in which a whole kind of world of cultural production was emerging in order to kind of consciously or unconsciously to manufacture consent around this idea of Karachi as this kind of inchoate, incoherently violent space kind of lurking with the potentiality of terrorist violence. And we were, as artists, we were especially interested in the role of visual production and visual culture in kind of creating these ideas around Karachi and its public spaces. And we were especially interested in the role of maps. And I'm bringing up maps now because maps kind of comes up again and again. Mapping comes up again and again as methodology in our practice, as something that we're responding to, but that we're also kind of engaging with in our own work, in our own pedagogical work. But we were really interested in 2013 in the ways in which maps were increasingly, the visuality of maps was increasingly being mobilized to create this idea of Karachi as this wild, violent space. And that year, in the kind of mainstream English news media, there was a kind of increasing proliferation of maps. So Express Tribune, which is one of the main newspapers in Karachi, was one of the main English newspapers in Karachi, was creating daily crime maps. And Dawn, which was the other major English newspaper in Karachi, had opened a new GIS department in which they created this kind of this particular map that highlighted no-go zones, and red zones as particular neighborhoods in Karachi that were that had become homes for terrorists and had become sites of great violence that cannot be kind of it was interesting then later in 2013 to see that these maps were kind of building consensus towards what was then announced later in 2013 as the Karachi operation, which was a military operation carried out by the paramilitary rangers across Karachi that kind of wreaked a lot of violence. And the idea was to clean up Karachi, and was majorly kind of targeting these zones that these newspapers had repeatedly been marking out and demarcating as no-go zones and red zones. And increasingly later in our work, we find that these zones, these neighborhoods, become the sites in which you can really see the ways in which militarism and development kind of intertwine in the landscape of Karachi. And so Shana and I were interested in that moment in kind of also thinking about seeing in the academic and art and cultural communities, seeing just how much this idea of Karachi was being perpetrated and perpetuated. And so we were interested in thinking of other ways of being with and relating to and being in conversation with the land of the city. And so we did this project, our first collaboration, Exhausted Geographies, which was, as part of this project, we brought together a group of architects, urban planners, academics, writers, poets, and artists to produce a compilation of 7 maps and 7 essays that kind of tell different stories of Karachi, or seek to tell different stories of Karachi. And that really kind of rethink and reimagine the possibilities of the map form. We were really interested in the ways in which kind of this new practice of mapping and circulating maps about the city was so much in continuity with the colonial history of the map, especially in South Asia, as a tool for expansion, occupation, and colonial violence. And we were really aware of how that violence is really written into the visuality of the map, the kind of top-down aerial view, the flattening of space, the illusions of precision and accuracy, the erasure of human bodies from the surface of the land. And so with Exhausted Geographies, which is still an ongoing publishing practice that we are doing, we're really interested in collaborating across disciplines and communities to think about different ways of doing research and knowledge and pedagogy in Karachi. And then Karachi La Jamia kind of emerges from and in continuity with this practice. In 2015, at this point, it's been 2 years since the Karachi operations, and the military operation is very much underway. And in 2015, we're really seeing the ways in which this militarized violence is seeping across the no-go zones and red zones into cultural and academic worlds in Karachi, and how much this kind of state violence and brutality is beginning to impact cultural spaces and institutions and universities as well. And so in 2015, Shahana and I, we were both not only practicing artists, but we were also teaching at 2 different universities. And in 2015, we become really aware of the ways in which within the academic community and the art community, there's a kind of pervasive sense of fear, surveillance, censorship, and also a kind of ongoing compliance, capitulation happening that we really we felt a real sense of urgency to respond to that moment. And so it was really in April 2015, a period of time when there were some really big moments of state brutality and censorship in the cultural sphere in Karachi, that we that we kind of founded Karachi La Jamia. And so as we think of Karachi La Jamia as an anti-institution based in Karachi, seeking to politicize art education and collectively explore new radical pedagogies and art practices. It is a nomadic space moving outside the institution to occupy public spaces in the city as sites of study, disrupting imperial modes of knowledge production and circulation. Our sessions are site-specific, and we situate ourselves in the larger context to learn, share, and produce knowledge collectively while exploring new ways of inhabiting, knowing, and being with the city and being with each other. So we were really wanting to move outside of this kind of increasingly securitized and barricaded space of the university or the institution, and really think about what pedagogy could look like on the streets, and how we could create spaces and sites of pedagogy that create connections across communities and across movements in Karachi, whether those are anti-eviction struggles, environmental defense struggles, etc. And over the years, we have organized different courses in public space. And I'll give and experimented with many different pedagogical methods in the process. But also over the years, we've been consistently witnessing and documenting and researching and writing about the kind of ongoing weaponization of universities and education and knowledge in the ongoing militarization of Pakistan. So these are kind of 2 parallel practices that are going on the one side, the courses and the pedagogy on the streets, and on the other side, the keeping track and documenting and researching and writing about the ways in which the university landscape is increasingly being crack down on and is increasingly transforming. So just to give a sense of, in the time that we have to give a sense of what we've been doing, I thought I'd just give examples of 2 courses that we've done over the years since 2015. And so the first one that I'll give as an example is the Gadap sessions. And the Gadap sessions was a course that we started in 2016. And as a site-specific course, this course was situated in one of the main, in the earlier map that you saw, one of the spaces that had been highlighted as a red zone or a no-go zone on that map. Gadap is one of those spaces, one of those neighborhoods. And in 2016, when we conceptualized this course in collaboration with the Indigenous Rights Alliance in Karachi, Gadap was a neighborhood that was primarily occupied for generations and generations by Sindhi and Baloch communities that identified as Makami or indigenous to that land. And it was primarily pastoral land. And in 2016, this dozens of villages and tens of thousands of acres of this land was being occupied by a real estate mega development organization called Bahria Town to turn all of this land into private real estate. And the Indigenous Rights Alliance was a movement that emerged very much from this neighborhood in defense of this neighborhood as this kind of occupation was going on. And so in 2016, in collaboration with the Indigenous Rights Alliance, we put together a course that we had kind of started out thinking of as a 10-week-long course where we would bring students from across the city every Saturday to Gadap to witness and document the kind of ongoing occupation and violence that was happening in the land, but also to acquaint themselves with the landscape, the ecology of Gadap, and the kind of long history of these communities that had been living there. And so over the course of the 10 weeks, which then became 6 months, thanks to the commitment of our student participants and the commitment of Indigenous Rights Alliance and ourselves, we did a variety of methods, from oral historiography to guided walks, to workshops and meetings with lawyers, with urban planners, with people who could kind of shed better light on the larger processes that were happening in this space. And so over the course of these 6 months, we amassed a very large body of documentation and research that kind of gave insight into not just the ongoing violence of development and militarism in the peripheries of Karachi, but also give insight into a much longer history of inhabitation in Karachi, and a much longer history of ecological violence in the city as well. So our courses are very much are not something that we undertake with. It's not a goal-based methodology. It's not something that we undertake thinking that there'll be any output at the end. The pedagogy is the practice, and so we really go into our courses thinking of it as a course and not much beyond that. But often in our courses, we end up with these vast troves of research that then sometimes we may feel compelled to also share with larger audiences. And that was the case with the Gadap sessions, because it also felt like a really crucial ongoing process that needed more visibility. And also, and also just because of the sheer volume of research that was collected during that period of time. Mapping, again, was something that became a kind of consistent tool in this practice, whether that was kind of mapping to better understand the forms of erasure that were happening and the way that the landscape was transforming, or whether that was mapping as a kind of analytical tool to reflect on the research that we had collected. So we found ourselves as a group, and also with the Indigenous Rights Alliance, really using the map form in a more traditional classical sense to better understand what we were witnessing and what was happening in the space, and whether that was kind of the different architectures of occupation that were being mobilized by Bahria Town, or whether that was kind of getting a sense of just how many villages had been erased or destroyed, or whether that was getting a better sense of the ecology of that land, or even the sacred ecologies of sacred kind of geographies of that land. So we found ourselves using the map a lot, but when as an analytical tool, but when it came time to share some of our research with larger audiences, again, we were just really aware of the limitations of the map form. It's flattening of space, the violence of its aerial view, its erasure of human bodies, it's kind of the illusions of accuracy and precision, and its kind of incapacity to kind of tell this one-dimensional story. And we wanted to think of something that could be an interface that could be more interactive, that could be more multi-layered, that could also kind of help us very much on a case-by-case basis deal with just how sensitive a lot of the research and information that we had accumulated was. And so we ended up creating a website from scratch that was titled Off Struggle. Off Struggle was the title that we gave, naming the website out after a hill range that was in Gadap that had been leveled by Bahria Town. And the hill range was called Pahavaro. And Pahavaro means those who struggle. And so we named the website Off Struggle. And the website kind of serves as this space, this interface that you can enter into that provides like a series of portals that look into, that kind of give visibility to what that space looks like now as this kind of anywhere, everywhere kind of visuality of ongoing real estate annihilation and construction. And then each of these spaces in this grid kind of act as a portal into then unveiling a different story that we witnessed in the land that really tells the story of just how rich the history and the ecology of Gadap is, against this idea that the state and real estate development organizations were creating in that moment of this land as barren, wasteful, and insecure land. Another project that came out of the research at Gadap was a short film called Jinnah Avenue. And Jinnah Avenue tells the story of a road titled Jinnah Avenue that was built into Gadap as the main thoroughfare for this new real estate development project that then emerged on the land called Bahria Town. And some of you may know, Jinnah is the name of the founding father of Pakistan. And so we felt that the road Jinnah Avenue really provides us a good entry point into telling the story of the specific brand of infrastructural nationalism that Pakistan has been undertaking, and how roads kind of are a central technology for occupation and erasure in these processes. And then another course, a much more recent course that we have done and that is kind of still ongoing, that we're still working on, is called Hamare Syal Rishte. Hamare Syal Rishte means our watery relations or our fluid relations. And Hamare Syal Rishte was undertaken, a course that was undertaken in collaboration again with the Indigenous Rights Alliance, but also with the Pakistan Fisher Folk Forum. And the Pakistan Fisher Folk Forum is a fisher community organization that has been fighting for the coastal and riverine ecologies of Pakistan and the coastal communities since the 80s, and has done some really, really incredible work in curtailing different development projects and different securitization and militarization projects along the coast. And so with the Pakistan Fisher Folk Forum, we decided to put together this course, Hamare Syal Rishte, which over a period of time introduces students to the different aquatic landscapes of Karachi. From the coastal islands, there were two coastal, at the time that we came up with this course, the Pakistan Fisher Folk Forum was resisting the privatization of two coastal islands right outside of the coast of Karachi that were sacred grounds for the fisher community and that were, again, kind of being privatized for real estate development. And thankfully, that project has been halted for now. But at the time, this was something that the community was really resisting, as well as fighting the destruction of the mangrove ecology at the coast of Karachi. We were also looking in the course at different port infrastructure projects, China-sponsored port infrastructure projects that had popped up across the coast of Pakistan, and their environmental impact and the ways in which that was being resisted. And we were also looking at the riverine ecology of Karachi that is a really, really annihilated, desecrated ecology due to, of course, climate change, real estate construction, but also because of sand mining, which has been really, really disastrous for Karachi's river ecology. And so we were also looking at Karachi's ephemeral rivers and tracing with the Indigenous Rights Alliance the pathways, the disappeared or disappearing pathways of these rivers, and the different kind of, again, infrastructural projects that are endangering those ecologies now in this moment. So that's Hamare Syal Rishte. Just to say a little bit about the methods, with Hamare Syal Rishte, sorry, I'm just, I'll just read out a little bit about something that we've written about Hamare Syal Rishte. As much as Karachi's history and present is marked by state violence and erasure, it has also been marked by a long and rich history and tradition of resistance and refusal. From our ephemeral rivers to our coastal islands, from farmers to fisherfolk, battles to defend the ecological body of Karachi are an ancient and ongoing pedagogy. Hamare Syal Rishte was a month-long site-specific course centering the coastal geography of Karachi and the long-enduring, ongoing movements in defense of this landscape against state and international attempts at privatization, desecration, and development. In Hamare Syal Rishte, we moved through the range of Karachi's aquatic landscapes and extractivist impulses, from disappearing seasonal rivers devastated by sand mining and construction to the decaying mangrove forests in the sea, from emerging China-sponsored port infrastructure to sacred islands at risk of being privatized for real estate. This course was carried out in collaboration with Pakistan Fisher Folk Forum and the Sindh Indigenous Rights Alliance. Side by side with students from across the city, with activists and communities at the forefront of defending our ecologies, we shared maps and meals, tea and knowledge. We traced the land with our pens and with our feet. Karachi's dry wetlands have been for many, including us, a rich, fertile, and bountiful plain in which to generate life, knowledge, and connection. We continue to rely on our land's immense generosity to hold and to sustain this, our humble attempts at reciprocity, our ecstatic eco-pedagogies. So Hamare Syal Rishte has kind of turned into an ongoing project. With Karachi La Jamia, our courses and the work that we do is necessarily done at a small scale, partly because we are working with a dearth of resources, but also because of the sensitive nature of the work that we're doing. We try to move around in small groups. We try to be inconspicuous and subtle. We try to go AWOL for periods of time. And so we necessarily have to work at a small scale, which also allows us to bring a certain intimacy and sensitivity to the work we're doing, and a carefulness and a cautiousness. But then we also are really aware, again, of the bodies of research that emerge with every course that we do, and the need that we then feel, the impulse that we then feel to circulate that world, that kind of those archives that emerge. And also that so much of our work is very much in continuity with a really long, vast, rich history of academic, scholarly, creative, cultural production in this specific region of Sindh that we are located in, around water politics, water infrastructure, and water ecologies. And so with Hamare Syal Rishte, as we've been moving forward, we've been thinking about ways to create different ways to circulate the research beyond the kind of site-specific live moment of the course. And so we've been creating a series of pamphlets, a series of publications that share the syllabus, the kind of bibliography, our references, but also the writings that emerged from the course. And we also have been putting together, in a kind of attempt to expand our audiences and our reach, we've been working on creating a series of children's books that also kind of tell the stories of the different water ecologies of Sindh and allow children to connect with and engage with these sacred ecologies and learn the stories of these ecologies. Again, many of these rivers, many of which are kind of disappearing ecologies. So I'm very aware of time. I don't know if I have much time left to say more. I'll just end by mentioning our most recent publication, which is an essay titled Wild Thoughts, Land and Knowledge Enclosures in Karachi. And that was what I had kind of given as a reference for this talk, for this presentation. And this essay that we published recently in an online publication called Decolonial Hacker really brings together these two practices that we've been doing in Karachi La Jamia, these pedagogical experiments on the one hand, and then the tracking of the militarization of universities on the other hand. And with Wild Thoughts, Land and Knowledge Enclosures in Karachi, we write about the ways in which, with a focus on the Malir River, which is, again, very close to the kind of an overlapping neighborhood with Gadap, and Malir River is the river around which Karachi really initially emerged as a city. And this ecology is again being threatened by the building of a road called the Malir Expressway. But it's also this ecology, the larger ecology of the Malir River, is also being threatened by the privatization of that land for a project called Education City, which many of Karachi's biggest universities have invested in and bought land in. And so by telling the story of Education City and its kind of occupation of the Malir River ecology, we're trying to tell the story and to better understand these two symbiotic processes of land enclosure and knowledge enclosure, and the ways in which universities are instrumentalized, not just in the realm of knowledge production, but also in very real infrastructural ways. The infrastructure of the university is mobilized and weaponized as part of Pakistan's kind of military development nexus. So I think I'll stop here, and maybe we can open up for discussion.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I also have lots of notes. Again, if you have some questions, please raise your hands online, also in the room here. And maybe just to start, I would like to mention that I've noticed that Karachi La Jamia's website contains all these syllabuses, or some of them, in a PDF form. So I would encourage those who are interested to read more, also to look into them. They're really interesting resource. Perhaps I'd like to maybe continue the discussion about your methods. I noted that you mentioned shared maps and meals, which is very interesting, referring also both the kind of the research aspect of your work, but also the communal aspect. And it made me think the ways you bring people together, and maybe you could share a little bit about how you find the researchers, the communities, the stakeholders at these particular places, and how you think about these events and moments of togetherness in your work.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Yeah, I think with Karachi La Jamia, we've really been thinking of study as a form of sociality, as like a mode of connection, and as a way of community building. And very much the courses that we put together and the work that we do is very much emerges from our own communities and our own relations and our own connections, and then building upon those. And I think in some ways for Shahana and I, Karachi La Jamia was really our way of surviving Karachi and kind of building our own the world and the social worlds that we wanted to see in the city, and maintaining a level of safety around that as well. And so yeah, so with Karachi La Jamia, with each course kind of emerges from conversations and connections that predate that course. And it emerges from an ongoing movement that is very much underway. And so there's like a sense of, through the connections in Indigenous Rights Alliance, with the Pakistan Fisher Folk Forum, or communities that we're working with predate the course. And the course emerges out of that relationship, and the course emerges out of conversations that happen there. And then beyond that, we put out open calls for every course that we do. And with the open calls, we maintain, we have to work on a small scale. We can only have a certain number of participants to keep everyone safe. And also, again, because of the dearth of resources. And so, but there's also something about the nature, the site-specific nature of Karachi La Jamia courses that can often be a little bit prohibitive, in that not everyone is up for what we do. And not everyone is up for the somewhat grueling nature of how these courses unfold. And so we've never had to turn anyone away. It's been really automatic, the small scale. And again, these students, the participants, are also extensions, again, of our own communities, since Shahana and I both have been teaching for a really long time at art schools in Karachi. But there has been also been a really interesting transformation that has happened from our first course. The first course that we did, every single participant was someone who we personally knew. And the most recent course that we did, which was Hamare Syal Rishte, we did not personally know any of the participants. They were all like certain degrees removed from us. So there's a kind of expansion that's happened over the years as well. But I think really that moment of connection and that fostering of connection and making connections and building community is really what the where the knowledge comes from, and is really at the heart of what we're doing at Karachi La Jamia. And we really see also over the years, we've also seen the ways in which some of these connections are lasting, and they go in places that are unpredictable, and that that also kind of go beyond us. And so over the years, we've had participants in courses like the Gadap sessions who then went on to do PhDs in studying that region or studying that particular real estate development organization. And then their relationship with, different community members over there kind of outlasts mine. And so I don't know, I hope that answers your question in a way.
Yes, it does. Thank you. And we have another question from Sabah. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I don't have a question, but just an expansion of what you were saying also for Chris's question, that we have seen your work, Hamare Syal Rishte in Khoj, and like we really liked it, all of us, like students from BFA here. And I think the expansion that you were talking about, it's really working, and it's, reaching different countries, and at least the South Asian countries probably. And I think I really like what you're doing. I just wanted to say that.
That's so
Thank
amazing
you.
to hear, because it's almost like the scale question. It's like maybe in the local context it's actually small, but the resonant factor is maybe, you know what I mean, not so small in the end. You know what I mean?
Yes, yeah, totally. And I think this is something that's a little bit new for us. I think we've been working for many years. We were working in this really hyper local way. And also, again, there was like a certain level of also being subtle, being inconspicuous that we were trying to do. And over the last year or so, we found interest kind of growing from global audiences as well. And that really gives us, not only does that give us the motivation, but it also gives us better tools and resources to then expand on the work that we're doing. So things like the recent publications that have been coming out with the children's books and the CELAB syllabus. Yeah, those are things that we now have, we now can think about doing or have the resources for producing that kind of work, which we didn't before. So that's really incredible. And yeah, I'm really glad to hear that you saw the work at Coach. I think it kind of also connects to Chris's question of like, yeah, sociality, because now that we have get opportunities like showing our work at places like Coach, we really have to think about what does it mean for this work to be circulating in exhibitionary environments, and what does it mean to be turning this work into something that is exhibitionary. And we've really been thinking about ways in which we can kind of reproduce those same sites and spaces for sociality that we work in Karachi within the space of the museum or within the space of the gallery. And so for us, like, as a nomadic space, as a space that's not in any kind of built environment, Karachi La Jamia, that we're just kind of always on the go and just working with whatever resources that we have. We kind of, the spaces in which study happens are spaces of sociality. So study happens in dhabas, in like chai, in tea stalls, right? Study happens by the water, or study happens in public libraries, or in activist offices that are kind of, in these like set apart spaces. And so we kind of try to reproduce that same atmosphere in the exhibitionary context as well.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? Coj is like an exhibition space in Delhi, is that correct? Just so that for our Eindhoven audience, is that right?
So Coach is it's a residency space also, where they invite a lot of international national artists. But it
Okay.
is also something that was initiated out of as an alternate space that stands where the mainstream galleries cannot reach.
Mm,
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah, I have a small question. I'm very happy to see your work, and I'm just curious. In India, if we are doing something like this, it is, I mean, everywhere this is seen something like anti-development activities. So how does it like is taken from the establishment there? Do they see it as something, some kind of resistance? Is there any kind of resistance, or how do you navigate if there is any? I'm just curious about it.
Yeah, I think like we've survived this long as Karachi La Jamia and doing the work that we do by really kind of having a clear sense and compartmentalizing Karachi La Jamia from kind of other forms of political work or political engagement that we're doing, or even our professional lives, or our solo art practices, etc. The Karachi La Jamia is a project where we're interested in we were interested in the survival of this project, and we were interested in making it sustainable for as long as it could be. And so with Karachi La Jamia, we were never kind of aiming for high visibility. In fact, really the opposite. We were really thinking about how can we do this work while being seen as little as possible. And so again, like we have no social media as Karachi La Jamia. The website is a more recent thing. And we weren't really circulating in galleries or in other kind of public spaces until very recently. And our participants, so in every course, we would have a maximum of about 15 to 18 participants, and then ourselves, and then the activists who we were working with. And again, we were really careful with every single session that we did. And it helps to work on a small scale, and it helps to work with your own friends and your own community, where you're able to kind of make sure that everything that you do and every time that you meet, that it's under conditions that are safe. And so we've, and yeah, even the idea that we don't have a space, that we're nomadic, is because we don't want to concretize ourselves in space that way, because we don't want to be seen in that way. We're in this for the long game, and we want to be able to do this for as long as possible. And that means maintaining a certain kind of opacity or a certain subtlety. And I think that's how we have survived as Karachi La Jamia without in Pakistan, which is like an immensely securitized place. And yeah, and so we've had that. We've also take long breaks between every course to kind of reduce the visibility as well for a little while before we come back up. So we've managed a certain level of safety and survival because of that. But of course, that there's only so much. We're working in really securitized spaces. We cross checkpoints to do some of our meetings and some of our courses. And so yeah, we really kind of function on a case by case basis. And of course, we have had encounters with the state because of the work we do at Karachi La Jamia, but also just because of our lives and our practices beyond that, and our connections and our communities beyond that. And so yeah, so it is a kind of a daily dance that you do of trying to kind of stay under the radar. But I think with Karachi La Jamia, we've just been really clear that we want this to be a project that survives, and even when we work at a small scale, like that's worth it. And that intimacy is also really meaningful. And so that's kind of, I hope that answers your question of how we manage to kind of not be subject to too much state
Yes.
cracking down.
Yeah, that's very good. Thank you.
I have one more question here in the room in Eindhoven with me.
Hi. Yeah. Hi, I'm Sasha. First of all, thank you for sharing your work. My curiosity was about, I'm really fascinated about the practice of cartography and mapping, which I think has been one of the main tools for creating knowledges and power. So my question is, aside from the aim of remapping the city for documenting the ongoing occupation, if you also had some more speculative or imaginative cartography of the city.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to say about mapping, because Shahana and I often talk about how we feel like we've come full circle in our relationship to mapping, where we kind of start out with this real resistance to the map form and this real critique of the map form as a tool for colonial violence, but also as this tool for contemporary state violence in Karachi and the militarization of Karachi. And also then, as I said, the ways in which that violence is really written into the aesthetic, the visuality, the form of the map. And with exhausted geographies, when we kind of reached out to academics and artists and architects, we really kind of reached out with the idea of creating maps that don't look like maps, that don't look like those kind of flat aerial view, border line drawing maps. And we did create maps that kind of shake up that form. And I think an example, the website that I shared with you, offstruggle.com, we were really thinking of that as a map, but it doesn't look anything like a map. And I'll also type out the URL in the chat so that you can take a look. But I think that is an example of a mapping project that doesn't use any of the traditional tools of cartography or map making. But having said that, I think that over the years, we've also found ourselves returning again and again to the map form as a way of visualizing and thinking about land, as much as we wanted to move away from it. I'll just share my screen just one more time, just to share with you a little slide of kind of coming together of different maps. And this was after the 2022 floods that happened the 2022 floods in Sorry, I just want this map to play, but it's not. Yeah, so after the 2022 floods in Pakistan, which, as you may know, were really massively cataclysmic, catastrophic floods, um, these videos are from research that we were doing in the wake of those floods in different parts of Sindh, the different parts of our province that had been really, really badly impacted. And again, as we were kind of trying to get a grasp of just the sheer scale of devastation and destruction that had happened, and get a sense of the land and get a sense of the space, we just found that our archive of research is full of people drawing maps for us. And we really found ourselves returning to the map form and really thinking of the map form in a different way, not as an aesthetic object, the production of an aesthetic object, but the map as this mode of connection, drawing a map as a mode of connection, as this kind of sacred process of connecting with the land, but also with someone else, to show someone the way, to show someone what the land is to you. And so I think over the years, we've found our relationship to the map form kind of warm up and become really aware of what are the capacities of the map as like a tool for storytelling, as a tool for connection, as a tool for visualizing, or manifesting the land. And we really think of like, we carry these like drawings in our notebooks, these maps in our notebooks, we carry them with us, thinking of them as these kind of energetic forms, like a kind of like almost like a yantra, as something that is like a that has this like piece of paper that has absorbed into it that moment of connection that we were attempting to build.
Thank you. I look out if there is another question. I'm very aware of the time and of our guests' time. Thank you so much for sharing your work, which is really a testament of how something that is operating on such a small, seemingly invisible scale can reach much, much beyond the borders and assume the limitations of small actions and can become operate in so many different scales. Thank you so much for your time. And I also thank Nicole, who I think is still perhaps with us.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. It's great to know that you're sort of nearby part of the time. We should bring you in and meet you and hang out in the group. We'll be in touch about that because we didn't know before you were like partially in Den Haag. So that's very cool to know.
Yeah, that would be great. I'd love to meet.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zara. Thank you so much, Nicole.
Thank you. Thank you.
Patricia, shall we conclude? Shall we wind up?
Sure, we can do that. Yeah. Is there anything that is there any notices that like Arun and Chris you want to let the groups know, or is that all sorted? I'm not sure if you have any words of wisdom for the burgeoning groups that are coming up.
Or the groups that are coming up. I had a small discussion here with the friends here in Eindhoven. I know some of you have already met or managed to meet. I even heard a name of a group emerging. So I'm very curious to know more. If you can meet, we will meet with you in individual meetings with Arun on the 16th.
15th.
And if you manage, 15th, sorry,
yeah.
15th. I repeat, and if you manage to meet before, then please do. And when you talk, please try to look at the kind of keywords or aspects that we assign to you, but they're also not assigned to you as a way of having to deal with those things, but these are our understandings of your practices and possible interests. And to everyone, I would like to remind you of the two great prompts that we have also received from today's guests. So you can find them on the website. this can be also a starting point for your discussions, also from the previous guests and their upcoming ones. So please try to find the prompts that you feel speak to you and to your group's interest, and that can be a really great starting point also to connect and spring off from towards your project. So that's maybe a last small word from me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. I mean, I would have said the same thing for the students. And also, I would like to say one thing for another next session, that is on the 11th, day after tomorrow. We have a person is not an artist, but he's from the research field. His name is Mr. Shankar Sharma. He's worked in power sector all his life, and he's going to give his input because power is a major, the energy is the major agent in pollution on and all other things that we are facing today. So, and also Patricia is going to be speaking on the same day. So we look forward to seeing you there.
Thank you
Wonderful.
so much.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
everyone.
Have a wonderful evening and afternoon.
Bye.
Thank
Ciao.
you.